Shopping for yarn is a completely different skill set than actually working with the yarn. Let's talk about how to navigate your local yarn store so that you can maximize all of the time you have in the yarn store and be really intentional about buying yarn that you're actually going to use and not accumulating yarn just to accumulate it. When it comes to project planning, there's two ways to approach project planning. The first is to lead yarn first. The second is to lead pattern first. When you lead yarn first, it's a lot more fun and you get to fall in love with the yarn and then find a pattern to match the yarn. However, if you're leading pattern first, it's going to be a lot easier because you're going to have a guideline to work from already. It's going to be much easier to start with a pattern, to start with a specific project in mind, and then find yarn that's going to match into that project. Yarn stores are either organized by brand and then by weight, or by weight and then by brand. Sometimes you'll walk into a yarn store, it'll kind of be all over the place. So some make it a little bit more like a treasure hunt. Others are going to be much more categorized. You do want to make sure that whatever yarn you're using, you are falling in love with it, because you will be using it anywhere between 2 to 100 hours in a given project. Not only do you love the color and the way it feels, but you just love everything about it. You love its aura. Let's get really familiar with all of the yarn weights you're going to see in the local yarn store. Lace, fingering, and sport are going to be on the lighter weight side. DK, worsted, and Aran are going to be more of your sweater weight, followed by bulky and chunky are going to be in the heavier weights. Lace weights are typically held with something. So for example, holding a mohair lace with a fingering merino. Fingering is going to be also known as sock weight. So that is sock yarn. A lot of fingering weights sometimes will have nylon in it. That is going to reinforce your socks. You may not want that in a sweater, but you will want it in your socks. Sport is going to be the dividing line between the lighter weights and the medium weights in your yarn. It can be used in sweaters. There's a lot of sweater patterns that use sport weight, but it also can be used in smaller accessories. DK stands for double knitting, which back in the day used to refer to 2 strands of fingering held together. I've noticed that a lot of foreigners will say double knitting versus a lot of Americans will just say DK. Worsted is typically what a lot of us learned to knit or crochet on or work with first. Aran weight yarn is going to be 1 thicker than worsted. If you want a yarn that is going to fly by and be an easier yarn to work with, you don't want bulky weight yarn, because that's actually going to change the way that your hands work the yarn. What you want is Aran weight yarn, because it's not going to be as thick as bulky weight yarn, but it will still make your project fly by faster than a DK weight or a worsted weight yarn. Finally, bulky weight and chunky weight. A lot of yarn stores will have a little bit of bulky weight. It's not as common for local yarn stores to have a lot of bulky weight. They may have a little bit, but you may not have as wide of a color range as you're expecting. Next, we're going to cover fiber content. The first question we're going to ask ourselves is, do we want non-superwash or do we want superwash yarn? Non-superwash yarn is going to felt. If it gets thrown in the washing machine or dryer, it will felt. Superwash yarn will not felt when it's thrown in the washing machine, but it should still be treated as delicate. It should be on the delicate cycle, or really, it should be hand washed. The reason people don't love superwash is because sometimes it can have a little bit of a plasticky feel, and the superwash will wear off over time. Naturally, wool has tooth to it, and the superwash process combs and smooths out all of the tooth from the wool, making it so that there's nothing to grip if it gets thrown in the washing machine, so it won't felt. Let's talk about what soft yarn means. Soft is a concept that is different for every single person. So what may be soft for me may not be soft for you. What's soft for you may not be soft for me. Mohair to some people is going to add a nice haze and glow and fluff to their project, while it might be really itchy and irritating and uncomfortable to somebody else. Same with alpaca, wool, cotton, any of it. If you walk into your local yarn store and you ask for soft yarn, most likely they're going to point you in the direction of either alpaca, maybe yak, maybe even merino. It's important to keep in mind that the softer the yarn is, the more likely it is to pill. A lot of yarn stores typically have samples, and these are just examples of what you can do with the yarn. They should be treated as fabric that you have to choose from for your garment. If you can try on the sample, it's definitely worth trying it on just to see how it looks on you, how it's gonna fit, and it might give you some insight as to what size you should do for that pattern. A lot of samples will have sample tags on them, which will give you information like the name of the pattern, the yarn used, the color used, any modifications, maybe the needle size, gauge, but it's still important to ask a person who works at the store if there's anything else you need to know about what went into the making of that sample before you attempt it. So in addition to yarn and needles and tools, a yarn store is also going to have community. It's really important to ask your local yarn store if there's anything that they offer in terms of classes, makers meetup groups that meet once, twice a week. Classes are the easiest and most fun way to build your skills, meet new friends, meet new people, and just have shared experiences and bond over something that you all have in common. Yarn stores can also offer makers meetup groups that maybe meet once or twice a week and are basically just a place for makers to come together and craft. And sometimes they can have a pretty consistent flow of the same people, meaning you'll meet a lot of regulars and a lot of people who are doing the same thing over and over consistently. It's a great place to share ideas, tips and tricks, and see what sparks people's interest. It's also worth asking your local yarn store about charity knitting groups. Sometimes they're hosted through the local yarn store. Other times they're hosted by other people or nonprofits outside of the local yarn store. Another great community building tool is Facebook groups. Ask your local yarn store if there's any local Facebook groups that meet at restaurants, coffee shops, sometimes at the library, anywhere where people are just getting together and crafting. It's an excellent place to make friends and really get to know the other knitters in your community.